Hello and welcome to another Frontend Engineering Explained. In today's, we're going to have a look at testing your websites, web apps, whatever it is you need to test. But specifically, we're going to look at using emulators and simulators. Now, if you looked at the description before you watched the video, you would have seen that I mentioned that I'm on macOS. So some of this configuration might work on Linux. I'm not sure, but I suspect it's going to be quite different on Windows. If anybody knows of good resources for these, please let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to link to them in the description. With that said, let's dive in. So why would you want to use a simulator or emulator? Well, for one thing, not everybody carries around a bunch of devices like tablets and phones, especially, Android phone and an iOS phone and maybe an Android tablet and a Android phone. So, and of course you might be asking, but what about the tools in the browser? They're a good first test, and I'm not throwing shade for them at all. They're super cool. Use them. But the thing is, I have found more often or quite a few times that I thought everything was great, and then I opened it on my phone or in a simulator, either using Android or iOS, and then discovered that, oh no, this one thing is actually not working at all, or it's just different enough that it's problematic. So therefore, what I do now is I just use the emulator and the simulator. Why do I say emulator, simulator? Well, the Android Studio calls it an emulator, and iOS calls it a simulator. I often, and a lot of people often use these interchangeably. I'm pretty sure there is a nuanced difference between the two in terms of how it emulates or simulates the hardware and all this kind of stuff, and software probably. For our purposes, it's just something that's much, much closer to an actual hardware device than it is to switching into responsive mode or something in your browser. And this is especially useful when it comes to iOS and Safari. And in fact, with Safari these days, it kind of wants to open it in the simulator, which might be a hint that it doesn't feel like the responsive mode is probably doing a really good job there. Okay, that was a lot of preamble, so let's dive into it. So what are we going to look at? Well, we're going to look at how we will, of course, use an Android emulator through Android Studio, which I've already installed. Otherwise, this video would be incredibly long and probably very boring to watch. And then we'll also look at using the iOS simulator, both phone and tablet. And again, that's via Xcode on macOS. Again, already have those things installed. What I will also show you is how you can use the DevTools in Safari to then inspect and debug your code running in the simulator, which is another nice thing you can do with the simulator, where it's can be quite a bit harder if you want to use an actual hardware device like my phone or your phone. You won't be using on my phone, obviously. Also, then the same thing, how you can connect the Chrome DevTools to your Android emulator. The other thing that I'm going to cover is on one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment at Factorial. We run the whole local setup using DDev, which is basically creates like this local development environment using PHP and, in our case, Drupal, and then our fronting code and all this kind of stuff, and it makes a whole environment. But also what it creates is like a local domain. So instead of doing like localhost 8080 or something, you would, for example, type in windows.ddev.site, something like that. Now, how do you access that now with these external devices? Sometimes these things can just work magically because it shares your same network and therefore it can pick it up. With the Android emulator, definitely not. With the iOS simulator, I think it might just work, but I do some configuration for the Android emulator that just might end up fixing problems on iOS as well. So it'll work everywhere, which is the important part. The reason I can't simply, for example, forward that using something like Tailscale or ngrok or something like that is because the domain that I hit the first time sends you off to an IDP, which is basically a service that provides single sign-on. And then when it redirects back to the domain. And there's only a set of certain allowed domains. And I don't have access to add any additions to these. And if I now use some forwarded domain that's given to me by Tailscale or ngrok, then the IDP just says, I don't trust this URL, so go away. And so I have to use that domain. So I need some kind of local reverse proxy. You can do that with Nginx. You can also do that with Apache that comes by default installed on macOS. But I found something which you've been seeing here on my screen the whole time, Caddy, which I have no idea. I only stumbled upon this now, but it's super cool and it makes the process of creating a reverse proxy extremely easy. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So what I'm going to use is I have this site that I built with 11t called TechCats, and now normally I would do npx and then serve. And then, of course, now I can access this over localhost 8080. Again, now I can't do that because this is going to be we're going to look at the scenario that we have a local domain configured and that we need to use this domain inside our emulator and simulator. So let's go ahead and close that out, but we'll leave that running. And then on this side, I have Caddy, so I have Caddy installed as well. And I will link all of this, of course, in the description. On Mac, I just used Homebrew, so brew install Caddy. And now I can do, so I have these commands just so I don't have to type the whole thing out. But essentially, also you have to use sudo when you're doing the reverse proxy the way I'm doing it here. And the reason for that is because it's going to bind to port 80 and you'll need sudo to do that. So I basically just use sudo caddy reverse proxy from, and I'm going to set up in a second techcats.local in my hosts file on my local machine. And so I want Caddy to basically forward all requests that go there to localhost 8080, which is where 11t will be serving stuff from. So I'm just going to hit that. It's going to ask me for my password, which I will type in, and it's off to the races. It's running. Now, what I need to do is I need to go and do sudo again. Now I'm going to use VS Code to edit my hosts file, and on Mac it sits at etc/hosts. So I'm going to open that. It's again going to ask me for a password, and it's opened it up. You can see already I have this typed in, but it's commented out at the moment, so I'll just uncomment it. So here I'm saying when something requests techcats.local, then resolve that to 127.0.0.1, which is localhost. So I'll go ahead and close that. Now I want to run this thing, and it may or may not be necessary, but this ensures that your local DNS will immediately pick up this change to your hosts file. So again, it's a sudo command that basically flushes the cache, and then it basically kills the mDNS responder. But what happens is it just immediately starts up. So it sends this HUP, which means hang up. And then what that does is it just kind of just reloads its configuration. Now, this will not be a problem, but I just want to mention this. When you flush the DNS cache, of course, this affects the entire Mac, right? So websites that you've visited in the past will have to do that initial lookup to resolve what the DNS or the domain, which IP it points to. So the first time you go to sites, you might see that it's a little slower, but you probably won't notice that much of a difference. And of course, you can try to just do the editing of your host file and just see if it works, and then don't worry about this one. But if you find that doesn't work, run this command and see if this solves your problem. So I'm going to run it now, and that's it. It's done. So with that in place, I should be able to go to techcats.local, And now it's going to probably, let's see, it's either going to load or it's going to complain that it's not secure. It loaded because it tried to load over HTTP. It's accepting my certificate, because you can do that with Caddy. With Caddy, you can do Caddy Trust, and then it adds a locally generated and signed certificate to your Mac's Trust store. But you will find that it's most likely going to complain at us when we run this in the emulator and simulator. But that's okay. We can just open the advanced, I'll show you, and we can just move right along. So as you can see, this is actually running over techcats.local. And if we go all the way back here, you can see that we're under the hood, we're actually hitting our 11e site. Okay, now let's start with Android. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go in your directories and you want to look for, so it's my username and then library Android SDK emulator. So again, I installed Android Studio, and then you have to install your emulator. So maybe let me show you just real quick. I don't want to go too deep into this because these things often change and it's probably better for you to follow the documentation. But here's this thing called Virtual Device Manager. And so, for example, you'll see here I have a Pixel 8. And then if we go into edit here, I have this Google APIs ARM64 V8A system image. It's important that you use the Google APIs one and not the one that, I think, so here it says Google Play Store, not that one, because that one is locked down as if it's a real phone that people will buy. And so some of these ADB commands that we're going to run will not work. It'll tell you something like it's not, the bootloader is not unlocked, or you can't run this against a device running in production mode, something to that effect. So ensure that when you have one of your devices set up in Device Manager, go ahead and go into Edit and make sure that it's actually using one of these Google APIs system images. With that in place, you're good to go. So I'll go ahead and close here. And then, of course, again, like I said, your users, your username, library, Android SDK emulator. And then for me, I go into services and then I went to new Warp tab here. And so Warp is just the terminal emulator that I'm using here. You can use the plain terminal that comes with macOS or any of your others. It might give you the option to also open it in there. Otherwise, just go ahead and browse to it. So now what we want to do is we want to run emulator and then -avd. And then here I'm using the name of that specific device that I want to use. And the reason we need to do it from here as opposed to from within Android Studio is we want to pass this flag called writable-system. And the reason for that, you'll see in a second, is we're going to pull the device's hosts file, make an edit to it, and then push it back. And if the file system isn't writable, we are not able to do that. It'll just tell us it's a read-only file system. And you won't be able to do any of that if you're not running the Google APIs. So if you're running, for example, the Google Play Store type of image, so a production image, you won't be able to do any of this. So cool. I'm going to spin that up. So it's starting up the emulator over there. Let's just wait for it. Great. So in a separate tab, but in the same folder, although I doubt that this really matters, but you know, whatever. I'm going to do adb root. That just makes sure that we are running as root. I'm already running adbd as root. Then I'm going to do adb remount. That is just to make sure that it's in a write state so that we can actually write, read and write. And then what we want to do is we want to do adb pull, and we want to pull the hosts file that sits at /system /etc. So etc/hosts. And you want to pull it down to our local machine at /tmp/hosts. So we'll do that. And then I'm going to use VS Code again. So code /temp/hosts just to open that hosts file. and you can see again here, I have techcats.local already here, but it's commented out. So I'm going to uncomment it. And this 10.0.2.2, that is the IP address of the emulator. So, and then I'm just going to go ahead and save this, close it. And now we're going to do ADB push, and we're going to push our local one. So /tmp/hosts to /system/etc/hosts. So we're going to do that. And we can see here 1 file pushed, 0 skipped, all's good. By the way, if you want to make sure that that IP address is the correct, that is the default one. But if for some reason something goes wrong, what you can do is you can do ADB shell, and then you can do ping 10.0.2.2. And here you can see I'm getting a response, which means it is correct. It is because there I'm on the device and I'm pinging its own IP, so it works. Now, what we want to do is go here, and we're just going to close down our emulator. And now we're just going to start it up again. At this point, we don't technically have to start it up in write mode because we're not going to do any of that stuff, but it's cool. And so click on Chrome. Chrome opens up. And now we're going to go to techcats.local, and there it's running. Now, because I've opened this before, and basically I'm reusing the same, how would you call it, the same instance of the emulator. It has like a saved state. I've already bypassed the warning that you've probably seen if you try to go to a site that doesn't serve over HTTPS, or there's something wrong with the certificate. So if you click here, connection is not secure, but I just, there's that advanced, and when you click on that, you can just say continue to blah, blah, blah site. So this is the site running locally, techcats.local. Again, if we go to over here, we can see it's being hit. So if we reload. Okay, so now how do I debug this thing? For that, we're going to head into Chrome, and you're going to go to Chrome Inspect. And over here, you will see here SDK, gphone, blah, blah, blah. It'll say something different to you, but here's the emulator part here. And what you're going to do is you're going to click on Inspect. That's going to open up the Chrome DevTools that you know. And so here's our emulator running, and here is this guy. And now we can use a little picker, and we can pick anything here. And as we make changes here, it's also reflected in our emulator. And if we scroll here, it scrolls there. If we scroll here, it scrolls there. So now you are able to, and you can see it kind of holds this space at the top that you would normally have here. So you can already see this is different to what you would normally see in DevTools. But again, this is just an easy way to be able to select stuff. But where you want to do your testing and your clicking around is on this guy over here, so that you are sure that you are actually now testing on the device. So that is Chrome, and that is using our Android. So that wasn't too bad, and this is the hard one. Cool, so let's shut down our emulator, and we can close this out. You see our remote target is now gone there. All right, let's head back. So we still have our 11T site running. We still have Caddy up and running. We don't need to make any other changes here now, because remember, we've already set up our techcats.local to point back to localhost. Now we're going to head into Safari. And here you can see techcats.local. I'm just going to enter here. So it's running here already. And now if you click on the develop, of course, let's first go into Xcode, because there's something here. So the first time Xcode starts up, it's probably going to ask you to install some stuff. Make sure you select the iOS, so that's installed. And then you can go to, I think it's Open Developer Tools, and then Simulator. And the first time you start the Open Simulator, there might be no simulators yet. Or you might have the list that I have here, or depending on if you're watching this in the future, there might be iPhone 17 or 18 or 28 or something. But you might already have a list. Alternative, you can create a new simulator, and then here you can select the version of the OS. You can select the different form factors and that kind of stuff. But you should have a default set, like the set that I just showed you there. Okay, so with that set up, you will then, when you click on develop, you'll see open page with, and here is iPhone 16. So I'm going to click that. And now it's going to go ahead and it's going to open up our techcats.local in Safari on iOS. So nice. So let me just close all these other ones and come back here. So this is running on iOS. How do we debug it? Same story. The one thing that I found really useful is with your emulator active, just go ahead and click on Window and then stay on top. This just makes sure that when you click back and forth between this and between your developer tools, that you don't constantly have these things switching between one another. This will just ensure that this always stays on top. So now when you click here, you'll see there's like my MacBook, and here's this one, and there's this guy. And you can see when I hover, it shows you that that is what it's targeting. And that's it. It's open now. And now we can, same thing as we did with Android. It doesn't unfortunately open a little preview here that we can kind of inspect. But, you know, you can easily enough find the things. I say that this is a pretty simple layout, not too complicated. So it could be a bit of a pain, but at least you have your DevTools, right? You have your console, you have sources, network, timeline, you have everything here. And again, if you change stuff here, like turning off display grid, you can see it changes live on the emulator. If we, I don't know, change this, you can see how things move around. Now I've completely removed that. But again, you can just go back and reload it, and we're all good again. And so you can totally test your site, right? You can click around. If anything looks funky, you can see this is updated for where we are now, and all good. And then once you're happy with whatever's in here, you can go ahead and close this one and close this also. And then we can go back here and say develop. And now we can, for example, say, hey, open it up in M3 iPad mini. And while we're at it, let's just switch it over. And same deal here. Again, window, this is still set to stay on top, so it's going to stay on top. It's up opening our techcats.local. So we're all good there. And now we can go back to our browser, go here. Again, we can see it there, techcats.local. There we go. We have this little dude here, so we can do any debugging we want to do. We can, you know, do whatever you need to do to test. So you can click around if anything looks funky. You can debug using all the tools that you're used to having. And that is it. Not that much of a pain. Again, I do not know how different this is going to be on Windows or Linux. I'm hoping it is as easy as this, and that the tools I showed you now will also help you out there. If not, please let me know in the comments if there's any tools or setups or resources that you've used that's explained how to do the same situation but on Windows and or Linux. And again, I'll be happy to link them up in the description. If you have any comments, any questions, please let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to help you out, answer, clear anything up. If there's anything I missed, if there's even easier ways to do this stuff, let me know. Of course, one other option you have is there are tools like Browser Stack, Source Labs. The thing that I struggle with them oftentimes, the upside is you have almost infinite devices. Here it can eat up quite a bit of your hard drive with all the different versions of the OS and all this kind of stuff you have to install, especially if you do Android and iOS. And you don't have that problem with something like Browser Stack. But what I have found problematic with that is latency. And I'm on a fast fiber connection with like 200 megabit per second up and down 90% of the time. And even then I've experienced lag where it's a pain to test. Like scrolling can be annoying as heck. So, but it is an option. There is an option. Maybe me being in South Africa, there isn't any I'm too far away from the origin server and the latency is just too much, and it's a problem for me. And if you're in the same situation, this might be the way to go. For me, it's really nice. It's fast. It's responsive. I have access to all my tools. Everything is running on my machine. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this. This has helped me a heck of a lot to debug stuff and fix things much, much faster than I have in the past trying to use Browser Stack, Source Labs. There's another one that I can't remember now. Let me know what you think. How do you go about testing in all these different things? And again, do continue using your responsive tools, your responsive mode and everything in there. These things are useful and it's definitely a great first pass, but don't skip the emulators and simulators or using tools such as Browser Stack or Source Labs. And that's where I will end it. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to hearing from you. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it the old thumbs up. If you want more content like this around HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, testing, all the things front-end engineering, and also the more softer skills around career and working with people and that kind of stuff, I will cover these topics also over time. And if you have specific topics, feel free to ask me in the comments. Always happy to hear what you would find beneficial, what you're wondering about, what you're curious about. And until the next one, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. And until the next one, keep rocking the free web and peace.